The Spin-Off Podcast Network. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
The Fold is brought to you by O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. No mai, hoki mai ki a The Fold, e mihi nei ko Duncan Gree tōku ingoa. I know I get a bit enthused, right, about our guests, and I'm like I got a problem with that. That's sort of fine, but that's just the nature of it. You all understand that. But this is my guest today. I should just come out and say it. She's Janine Morrell-Gunn, and she is a certified TV legend, as in she just yesterday was awarded that title at the New Zealand TV Awards. And honestly, like, you'll just hear the sweep and scope of her career is kind of breathtaking. Like, every name she says, and she's not dropping names, they just happen to be people who are like incredibly famous for having done heaps of things, and they were just sort of her colleagues or people she was interacting with. She is the founder of Whitebait Media, which is the iconic production house for children's media in New Zealand. What now? Like the 4:30 show, the Erin Simpson Show, Fanimals, the Son of a Gun show with her husband Jason Gunn. They're it in terms of children's media, and they're not it because she just sort of found a good thing and just kept at it. She's just so passionate and such a real visionary of it. So her background was, she did 15 years at TVNZ before founding Whitebait and rose to become commissioner of children's content. But, did that as a wahine Māori, as someone who was always in rooms full of men who were basically implicitly or more often explicitly challenging her about why she was there, and the fact that she has risen and pushed through and kind of made this thing happen is just a testament to her force of will. And then yet you hear her, she sounds like she's 21. She almost kind of looks like it too. She just basically has this kind of vitality and vision and like understands what the function of children's TV is in the lives of kids, but also just like in this whole society that we're trying to build. I don't think it's, that's overstating the case. So, she's had this extraordinary career in television. That's largely what this interview is about, but there is just so much wisdom and insight and just and kind of vision and purpose in this woman, and I think a lot of that comes across in this interview. If you're in any aspect of media, there'll be things out of here that are like light bulbs, and just you could not find someone who's more deserving of yesterday's award than her. This is Janine Morrell-Gunn on The Fold. Tēnā koe, Janine, and welcome to The Fold. It's an absolute honour to have a certified TV legend on this podcast, and congratulations on the super rare and prestigious award. How are you feeling out the back of it?
Very old, actually. I thought about the word legend and I thought, am I really this old? And all my friends, particularly women, said, actually you are. So, but it's also very humbling.
Oh. So I want to kind of survey your career, your path to legend status, and wonder if you could start almost before you actually got into the business. If you think about the act of watching TV
Yes.
way back in the mist
Yeah.
time, as your friends would remind you. And tell me what it was that made you think, actually, that's something I'd like to do. What were the shows? What was the nature of the medium that you found so compelling?
Yeah. Well, so I'm a product of the 60s, so a 60s child, and we didn't actually watch that much television. I mean, back in the day, didn't start till midday, so it's very prescribed, and really the adults in our house controlled that, mum and dad. And I remember getting the first TV, and I was quite old, so and probably 15 when we got a colour television.
Wow.
So, but for me, I suppose the journey into television really came from my wanting to be a current affairs producer. So I wanted to be two things, either a missionary or a TV producer. So go figure. And where that probably came from is that I was a girl with a cause from a very early age. So at 8, I had the Good News book club, and I had the Joy Luck club in my bedroom. So I taught kids from the neighbourhood about Jesus. And you could fit 12 in my bedroom. And then I went on to high school, and I was very much that pious do-gooding kind of person. And would it be no surprise that I became head girl and went out with the head boy, and I had a petition to get culottes for girls, so our skirt didn't ride up on the way to school. And then I decided, instead of 10 cents for Mufti Day, let's do recycling. So we're in the 70s by then, and so just would have all these crazy ideas. That one particularly was crazy because by the time everyone bought their beer bottles in their newspapers, and myself and my boyfriend, the only other person I could enlist, had hired a trailer and loaded all this stuff up and then taken it to the recycling, I got enough money to buy 2 trees, and had I got the 10 cents from everybody, we would have had 6. And that's probably so that in for a cause was very early on in life, and really I thought that being a television producer, and there was a show on called Close Up, a current affairs show, I thought, wow, change the world.
Right. So it was about the ability of television to impact people.
Yeah.
That drew you in. Did you ever, so how did you get your start? Because obviously your career, television tick, but current affairs, did that ever happen, or was it?
So I went to Canterbury, and one of very few, so from a very from Hornby, and very solid working class a suburb. So very few people went to Hornby. Most people invariably would say, "Where is Hornby?" And I got straight into Kenta, the student newspaper, and was very much involved there. In my day, you either the best job a young woman could get would be to work in the bank. All the boys went to the freezing works and went to Teagles, and you started paying your parents' board, and you had a car within 6 months, and that was life. And I had a mum who said, why not go to university? She wasn't sure why I was going, and so off I trotted. I learned so much there about everything but studying, and was part of Kenta, and then was studying political science and sociology, and was educational vice president and then the student president. So I was there for a long time.
You're a big overachiever, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. It's a big problem. So 81 was the tour, was big. So arrested in 81 for obstructing the carriageway. Mum saw me on the 6 o'clock news, so I didn't use my phone call for her. I rang work to say I'd be late. And my arresting officer said, good on you, girl. And sociology lecturer offered to pay the fine. But I do look back at that and go, the comms were terrific, and we didn't have a phone. Like, how did we galvanise ourselves as a small country to change something quite significant in the world and make that stand and take it to the world? It was a really tough time. Our family was absolutely divided. But what an achievement, really.
Extraordinary and formational in terms of the modern conception of self that we have as a nation.
So first year at university, I went to Auckland first time on a plane, and I walked in off the street into TVNZ on Queen Street, met a guy and said, I would like to leave university. He said, I think you should get your degree. And I went, okay. So, I sent him a Christmas card every year for 4 years.
That's smart.
Then there was TVNZ interns were advertised in the press, the newspaper. I applied. I got an interview, was flown to Wellington, and he was on the panel. So there you go. Someone I'd met for 15 minutes 4 years ago. So, the 3 questions I remember from that interview were 37 years ago, were what was the lead item in the newspaper today? And I'm from Hornby and we didn't get the newspaper. We didn't have it. But I'd flown on the plane, and in those days everyone had a newspaper on their seat.
Wow.
So I could answer that question. The second question was, would I direct a Miss New Zealand beauty pageant? And I was up with the play with that because the BBC had recently said that it was no longer relevant to women of today. This is in the 80s, so we're no longer broadcasting them. And the third question was, they noted I had a engagement ring on my finger, and when would I be starting to have a family?
Wow.
We're in the 80s.
So you've got the progressive stance of the BBC on one hand, and then the like very regressive question on the other.
I got in. And it was interesting because it was a year or so later, I was down in Dunedin and I'd been seconded. You would to be hired all around the country, which was great. These internships were incredible. I joined WIFT, Women in Film and Television. I don't know if it was called that then. And I was new and was tasked with photocopying the protest leaflets of the Miss New Zealand pageant that was actually coming to Dunedin that week. And I was so proud of myself because I managed to access the Miss New Zealand production photocopying number and typed it in and printed all the protest leaflets on their budget. I didn't know if I'd live to tell that story, but I thought it was cool.
That's a very bold move for an intern.
When I think about it, I didn't think that I could have got fired, which is interesting because I actually did the year later. So, and I didn't go to the protest, and I didn't throw meat at the stage because I didn't want to get arrested because I'd already been arrested with the Springbok tour. So, I was careful.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So when you started to make your way into the organisation, having avoided getting fired, was it that you just sort of came upon the kind of that sort of tamariki rangatahi space, or did it end up drawing you to? Because if you think about this cause thing that you've mentioned, if you ever really want to move society, you had the whole attention back then, which is different to now, but also get them right at the start.
Yes. It was probably, probably much more selfish than that. I was in the newsroom in Auckland. It was a very hard year for me because, yes, you're right. When you're at university and you're in your causes, you're in a bubble and you're with like-minded people, your values are very same. And then you go and work in this amazing network and the testosterone and the temper tantrums and the throwing of typewriters, and there was whiskey in the bottom drawer, and everyone's just fighting for their own story, which I like, actually, to get 10 more seconds, 15 more seconds, and bureaus, particularly between Auckland and Wellington News, were very competitive. We'd have a black box and we'd have a 3 o'clock and we'd all talk and everyone just argued for there. So that's why there was this throwing of typewriters across the room. Because
you had such constraint, like there's just only so many minutes and there's nothing else.
Yeah. And I loved news with a passion. And so being part of all of that, which I wasn't because I was new, and I was actually started out by, you won't know, but Andrew Diordney was a well-known broadcaster and newsreader in New Zealand. Yeah. My job was to type the auto cue and roll it down, her script, and then I'd have to hand roll it like this, and then she'd go, faster, faster. slow. She was fierce.
Wow.
But I would type the news for her to read the news that others obviously had written. I honestly thought I couldn't stay because I had thought that we were in there to change the world naively, and it wasn't really about that. So I was then sent to Dunedin and to blow up Selwyn Toogood, who was also a well-known broadcaster. And I was sent. My first job was blowing up his cue cards because he was going blind, and we needed to enlarge things. And I was sent off out to a photocopying shop, which was like very out there those days, and come back with all these words that were larger that he could read. And I was working there and was also seconded onto a teenage current affairs show. I kind of liked that, and I liked the interviewing people. I loved live directing and cutting and close up on you and get the answer, and loved the whole vibe. But I really wanted to get back to Auckland, to current affairs. And then the head of children's rang me and offered a position, and I said, no, thank you. I'd like to get back to current affairs. And he said, well, there is a children's conference in Oxford, England next year. And I went, okay, I'll give me a minute. And then rung back up and said I'd take the trip. So, yeah, it was quite a self-centred move. But going to that children's conference and going to see Top of the Pops and Danny Craven's News Round, and I met Roald Dahl, and then I came back to...
You met Roald Dahl?
Amazing, because they were doing this story, so I got to tag along, and then ended up at a layover in Singapore, and then wrote a kind of show, I thought, for kids that would be good, and then pitched it up when I got back and kind of started that way. Never looked back.
That's amazing.
Never wanted to be making content for any other audience. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. So the other thing about you, you know, in addition to the cause and the overachieving, is you're a wahine Māori in an industry which you described the testosterone, like the look of television was different back then. How did that sort of shape your experience of the industry and you know, inform the work you created? Like I sort of read that you got te reo onto to Sesame Street. Which seems an extraordinary thing to kind of done just as an aside. So tell me about that.
I think I grew up in Christchurch, and my father's from Wairoa, so we're Ngāti Kahungunu, and did not have a lot of exposure in Hornby to te reo or tikanga Māori. But I think I've always had a strong Māori heart. And the Sesame Street is probably kōrero Māori, taking the Spanish out of Sesame Street and putting Māori language in, was one of my most proudest achievements. And I was probably, 24 at the time. But I was able to enlist a whole lot of people around the building who wanted to be part of that kaupapa. So they were working in every other department, but for kids, and this is where the beautiful thing about kids, people will do a lot for young people and kids and give up their time. So we were able to teach a word a day through montage and waiata and phrase, and had the fabulous Lisa Rehana do the opening titles. And Shane Jones read the pūrākau, the stories, and Timuia Morrison was voiceover. So I just
non-stop legend.
Found all these people in the building, didn't know any of them, and just said, hey, could you come and help do this thing? And then the graphics, they were bored out of their brains doing very simple graphics for television news. So they did little animations for me to teach a phrase a day. But everyone loved it. So there was no cash for this budget. They said, Morrell, you can go make it, there's no money. But the below-the-line resource infrastructure, the people that were there, was easy.
They stepped up. What was the response to that? Because even now it can still feel, where the language is embraced, it feels like a lot more broadly, but there are still kind of pockets of discontent. And you read about even the word, like was it Nada Glavish's kia ora, felt like a moment, but how did that sort of run through?
I think that there was definitely movement, like Donna Awatiri and Rebecca Evans, and that call for Māori sovereignty was strong, and there was definitely within TVNZ, I thought, real momentum there. And then, I don't know, the 90s came along, Rogernomics, a whole lot of things. And did people feel pushed too far? I don't know, but it went backwards.
Right.
It actually went backwards. And this last probably 3 to 5 years, there's been a sea change. And we ain't ever going back. And it's all awesome. And, there's talk of, really Māori-led, co-governance, a lot more partnering, which I think is good. But I think you need extremism for moderates like myself, maybe yourself, to move forward. That's a good thing. So the pendulum has swung in this particular area, also with men, and #MeToo, I only ever worked with men, and they were hard, and they didn't want you there sometimes. And did that affect me? I think that made me more prepared. Like, they'd come back, crew, and they'd go and see the producer and say, she hasn't got it. And then you'd get spoken to. And it made you work on those scripts and hand them out and say, have you got your script? And they'd throw them on the dash of the car. They weren't interested, and they'd just chat. And so you had to be harder than you really were. And you had to, not engage beyond the work. It was that kind of time if you wanted to stay in there.
Sounds really brutal, like a pretty tough environment to succeed in. I
don't think, and it's funny because I don't think men ever stood in my way, but they never metaphorically invited you to the 19th hole, or they didn't make room at the board table. They didn't
clubbiness.
Not that. And I think, there's still elements of that in society, but again, there's been a huge change. Yeah. We were also women of an era where people said jump and we went how high, and that's probably a little stupid in retrospect, but that was the way it was, whereas now we employ a lot of women at Whitebait, and I love that they'll come in and go, you know what, Janine, I could actually do that in 4 days. And I go, oh, it's a full-time job. And they go, I think I could do it in 4 days. And I go, okay, let's see. And they can, and they don't need to be here for the 5th. They can have lunch with their mum, their partner, walk the dog, So that ability for that flexibility for women now, I think, is really, really important.
You talked about joining WIFT or a precursor,
yeah.
It's Women in Film and Television, and you've gone on to have governance roles sort of throughout the sort of extremes of the industry. Has part of that been, or have you had the ability to kind of create space so it's not quite such a grind for women like you coming through in sort of subsequent generations?
I don't know. I mean, I used to think everything was black and white, and now as I get older, I see everything in one big load of grey. And I find myself all the time saying on the one hand and on the other, and that ability to step into someone else's shoes. And I think also, at the end of the day, I take 100% responsibility for me and my choices and actions, and live that attitude of gratitude. So I'm pretty well just trying to get my own act together, let alone being able to influence others. At Whitebait, we've had hundreds of young people come through. I learned so much at TVNZ, really great systems and processes from this big company that when we took that leap and put the stake in the ground at Ōtautahi and set up Whitebait, Jason and I had a lot of really good stuff to take forward, although we were still enormously, naive about it. And when people come to us about, where's the coffee, where's the pens, where's the toilet paper, and, where's the stationery cupboard? And I thought that would be my handbag right about now.
Relate.
And so there was a lot of learning, but the culture is the thing. And young people wanting to come in and get a few skills in their kitty and off they go. We're a springboard. We can't hold them. We're not, we're low cost, high volume kind of programming, and they need to leave. Sometimes I go, just 1 year, and they'd look at me and I go, you're leaving, aren't you? Yes, off you go. And then there'd be another person, I go, maybe it's time could I just have 1 more year? And so, you become a family, and you'd like to think they take that kitty of skills that includes the craft, but also around how to treat people and work with one another, and that they walk out the door a little taller.
Yeah, I want to talk about Whitebait, but just before we do you want to tell me about your time commissioning at TVNZ? Because you rose very quickly to a very senior and obviously profoundly influential role there in terms of during a time when TVNZ was the show. There were so few options for what Rangatahi saw that that you knew you had just a profound influence and therefore a responsibility to shape how they understood themselves and the country that they were growing up in. So tell me about taking that role and about the thinking that you had about what you wanted to accomplish with it. So
it's something we've carried into Whitebait, but I always felt, children needed to be at the centre of everything we did. So probably my uni background meant that I was quite into research, so we had researchers for everything. And, initially we didn't even have, computers, right? So you'd go to the library or you'd get on the phone or go out and see people, really. And I'm still a huge fan of our team going out. I love focus groups. I love hearing what kids have to say. We've got survey monkeys up the wazoo we can do now, but I still really love qualitative going out and reaching out. So putting kids at front and centre, that really about being able to for kids to be able to hear other kids and see their world. So it's really important that we try that kid-led kind of kaupapa, which I think was what I saw back then. And so shows like Life in the Fridge Exist was, a lot of young reporters coming out and doing things that interest them, and then just showcasing their talents, and so much stuff from overseas was British, more American now, but just even being able to hear their accents. So parents will say to me now, their kids do have American accents, so it's really always been about holding the windows of New Zealand kids' content open for as long as we can. And given that TVNZ have a commercial imperative, it's not easy.
The Fold is brought to you by Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa, with over 4,000 out-of-home advertising sites nationwide across both street furniture and retail centres. I'm super grateful to Media for enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Skinny are helping you show how smart you are with the 1Q quiz, an all-new, super challenging and super quick daily quiz built by the Spin-Off. Every Monday, Skinny are giving you the chance to prove you're smart with the Skinny Extra Credit question. Get it right, and you'll get the chance to score yourself some Skinny Extra mobile credit, so you can text, call, or even video call your group chat and gloat about how big your brain is. T's and C's apply.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
So what was the thing that led you to ultimately leave that amazing job in this amazing, influential organisation to find Whitebait, and then to do it in Ōtautahi, like that as a, it's obviously it's a big city, but it's not one of the centres of the televisual universe in quite the same way, and yet seems to have been a great place to say this is about kids and to nurture talent that way. Obviously, you have the broadcasting school there.
Yes.
So yeah, just tell me about that move. That era.
TVNZ closed Christchurch TVNZ down and then moved children's to Avalon, and I EP'd from there and commuted for a year, probably 2, and had 15 years at Television New Zealand at that point. So am from Ōtautahi, and so's my now husband. So it was really about putting a stake in the ground and starting our own business. And what's been good about that is that we come to Auckland this is what I say, I come to Auckland for my orders and I go to Wellington for the money and basically live in Christchurch. And have been able to have a lifestyle that I don't think I would have been able to have, we would have been able to have with our 4 kids had we lived in Auckland. I see it's the getting around and the access, to be able to have your own business and then, albeit only make the last 20 metres of the marathon, but at least you're there and whip out to stuff that the kids are doing. But also for the team, it's real head down, bum up. That's what we did, is just keep your eye on focusing and serving the audience and making your shows. I took great pride in that a lot of people didn't know we were from Christchurch, and that we make shows for all New Zealand young people. And whilst a third of people live in Auckland, 2/3 do not. So we have a lot of small towns in our country, and I think we've been able to reflect nationally by living quite regionally. Also for presenters and hosts and things like that, like if we'd come up here, they would have been out to, premieres and events and cutting ribbons, whereas in Christchurch, they got a good Milo and sent to bed early on a Saturday because you've got to be up and on board by, 5 o'clock in the morning. So I think we avoided some of that. We could look after and scaffold them while they got their skills and made it all about the audience.
That's really interesting. It's when I was thinking before you came on, like the nature of kids TV, it's long, it's high volume, it's relentless, and you're making it with young, almost intentionally relatively green talent. How do you create a machine that gets them all rowing in the right direction and also gets the best out of them, delivers a product for the kids, and also sort of protects them from that grind insofar as it's possible? Yeah.
So I believe the process is as important as the product. And so we do have a lot of systems and processes. But it's also important, I always say to new people that come in, give us 6 weeks, and then you should find rhythm and routine, and that you may go home some days and you can't speak, or you may go home and burst into tears, but you'll find it. And when you get your job under control, then you hold the hand of the person either side of you, because, that's where things fall down the cracks, but someday you'll need a hand. So we are really that whole Tātou one team that we build. And so we're really know what the kaupapa and the brief of the show is. Everyone knows everyone's roles, and your role within it can be a bit hierarchical, television, but it needs to then, we're big debriefers, so I love a good debriefing, because just own your stuff. So sometimes sound will have not today though, sound will have a terrible day, and then other days it's props doesn't go so well, but or the producers, our presenters doesn't come together. But you celebrate that, and people can say, hey, sorry, I didn't get to that lighting, or I didn't move on, next job. And so own your stuff, and we have theatre screenings, we show what we're proud of that we've made to each other, and we pretty well celebrate the opening of an envelope. Like we're always just like, little opportunity for a little drink, a little nibble here for birthdays. This year we have a theme. This year's going green, so we've had people out to learn us how to pump the tyres up to save environment, and we've got all the cafes who will take us, we go for lunch walks with our wee lunch boxes, so that, we're recycling those, and, a lot of initiatives, green initiatives, which we can probably do for years and years. We've got an e-scooter that goes into the drawer every week. You get to take the scooter home for a week. So you spend more time at work sometimes than you do with your own whānau and friends, right? So and sometimes you sleep the night and stay there because you've got to fill the black hole. You've got to fill it. And so you've got creating that culture of kindness and fun, and we like to have fun.
Yeah, it feels the only way that you could get that thing out.
I think also having 4 children and seeing young people come through with a very expensive student loan, and a big bag of expectations, managing that, and people will come in and we have to help them, get something out of hock, or we've got to help. They've got car troubles or pay off a loan, or they need advance for accommodation. We're all. That's the world in which they're entering, and you've got to help scaffold that.
So you talked before about going to Auckland to get your orders and Wellington to get your money, which
a little bit,
quite a cute way of putting it. Do you feel like that system that we have, which is actually potentially on the verge of massive change, which we'll touch on, do you think it served New Zealand well for that period where it was it's still radical by world standards, but and very different to what the paradigm is in other countries? What did you think of the New Zealand on-air system?
I think it was really. I think it has worked. It's produced a lot of great content, and that enabled us to see ourselves on the screen. In regards to children's, I've always advocated for children to be able to have the same range and diversity of content as adults have enjoyed, and that really probably hasn't happened. The budget, I don't know, the BBC kids would be around 80 million, and we get 10 to 16. We always in this country, we knock it out of the park for the small country we are and what we produce. But over the years, we don't really see children's documentaries there. We're making a game show, but if you want a game show on weekdays, you haven't been able to have a magazine show as well. It's one or the other. Children's drama doesn't, it seemed to me, receive the same sort of support that adults drama does. Across the board, I've grown up in an era where children's are often the lowest and last on the agenda. It's and kids. And as we talk more and we move towards the Aotearoa New Zealand PME, there's a lot of underserved communities that quite rightly are putting their hands up for funding and for support. My concern is that, and then they say all of these groups and kids, and we're last in a long line of ends. And the thing is, because kids can't represent themselves, 0 to 14-year-olds are 22% of our population, And so I thought, I don't like putting my head up politically now. It's not, I did that way back, right? And but this year, went along to select committee, with that plea, I suppose, but also to be able to say, hey, if in these 7 parts of the legislation you added and children, that'd be a good thing, and maybe it'll happen in 2. I don't know. So I still feel the passion to represent children and young people, and step aside to give them more voice, as much as we can. But the windows for kids' content in New Zealand is very, very small currently.
And that's what I'm curious about, is because you have those constraints that you described, and you also have kids are the first to change behaviours. If you want to see the future,
start there.
So, in terms of the growth of platforms, the sort of, not necessarily the end of linear, but the end of linear as the default and dominant choice. The obviously Hey was an idea. I don't know to what extent it's become sort of somewhat orphaned within TVNZ. The rise of TikTok and vertical video and phone as dominant distribution device, certainly. How do you relate to that? How does Whitebait relate to that? And do you think that as a country we're getting near addressing the complexity of, you talk about the national identity stuff of American accents and so on. That was before, when there was a single pipe, effectively. now, where we don't even have visibility over what they're seeing or any ability to influence. And that's, on some level, a conscious decision we've made or not made. How do you think about this wild, changed world that we're operating in now?
Well, my generation let the technology in and didn't really understand it and to the depths in which it would prevail in our society. So it's a runaway train in some things. So, I feel partly responsible for that. With regards to making shows, well, it's all good. It's a multiverse that we make in now. So every show we make has a digital content producer who's putting content up before, during, and after linear, if it happens to be a linear show. So, and that is on TikTok and it is on Instagram. For linear, I still see there's a place for linear, and that's because I'm not wanting there to be change. But there's a couple of things for me. There's still, we have underserved audiences, and a number of our shows speak to lower socio-demographic audiences where they are just watching free-to-air. So that's their diet. They don't have phones or the money on their phones or the screens on their phones. So, that inequity exists. So we have, I think, responsibility to serve those kids, and that's important. The other thing for me is I think kids can have a 360 experience. So they can pick up television, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, wherever they want and join it all up however they want to. We need still to have safe spaces for kids. And I wouldn't like YouTube to be a primary platform for our investment from the government into kids' entertainment. I think it's one platform as are many. So what I do fear a little bit is that people in life, adults, by virtue of the phone and all the content and the analytics that determine what it is you get to see and watch every single day, we're becoming siloed as adults and siloed as young people. So you are this type of person and there's your content and it's coming to you. Similarly with children, and it gets fed that way. That is not, I have to ask myself at my age, what kind of ancestor do I want to be? What is my legacy? And I'm all about joining up. And I think we need to have more joined up opportunities, which is why I think the PME is a good thing, because it joins us back up. And the pandemic showed an incredible shift in whānau viewing around the world. And Americans were logging in at over an hour of watching shared content with their kids every day. That's got to be a good thing. And they were sitting down with their whānau and families and talking about the content. And that's what I had way back, is your first question, when I grew up. And we had friends that took us through the afternoon who stayed with us. And we're lucky. We see the impact of our work every day with chats and with chats and emails, and we still get the odd letter, but kids make a lot of things, love to do and share and all of that stuff. We get sent food, the odd pet, everything, because they want to connect with you, and it's just wonderful expressions of joy. So we get to see the impact, but the real impact is years and years later when adults can recall in acute detail these memories that they had watching content, with their friends, or if they were latchkey kids just on their own, and the relationships they had with others, their hosts and presenters through 5 years of their life, So there is still a place for that. There is still a place to create those friendships and those connections on linear, and in a small country like us, for those connections to be reflecting our diverse nation and our kids.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with that from there's a utopian element of that. And I think that one of the things that I love about mass culture, popular culture, is the way it knits us together as a society and creates like a shared understanding of the world, and not, that's a platform on which we can debate our differences and solve our problems.
That's right. It doesn't need to be all sorted.
No.
It's actually just bringing the conversation together, because at the moment we're not having them.
Yeah. And I think, like I saw on TikTok yesterday, David Seymour having a conversation with Moana Maniapoto about, his identity as a Māori and his views versus, what are considered dominant views of Māori. And it was just that, and it was like they were not in agreement at all, but the very fact of them being able to be on a screen, having that kōrero, just felt very like, it doesn't feel like a thing that can happen in many other places in the world at the moment.
And it's such a good thing.
It's a really precious thing, and I guess my sort of fear is like that as we move into this sort of distributed world of even getting someone to people to go to a linear platform, it just seems an increasingly hopeful thing rather than something that is research and how we sort of grapple with the huge complexity of then to serve what is, you're absolutely right to point out, it's a very big audience, but it just behaves in very strange ways, and we really don't have that same ability to control what they're seeing, and the cost of making things remains, even on a shoestring, it's still relatively high. I guess that's the thing that I sort of struggle with is how is the genie able to go back in the bottle and that kind of thing?
I don't think you even try to put the genie in the bottle. I think that there's so much good investigative journalism out there across platforms now, and that can be harnessed and presented in different ways, visually and audibly, which is what this podcast is about and things like that. I think a lot of it is marketing and branding. And I think that, we're engaging for the first time, it's almost product placement. How do we get our content out to those eyeballs and to those ears? And I think that then that's not something probably they've seen at odds, because it seems like that's a commercial imperative. But actually, if you call it an audience imperative, if you call it a knowledge imperative, wouldn't that be exciting if we started investing as much money as we see sometimes in a Coca-Cola campaign on content?
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately how we should view these distributed platforms, is that it's just important that exposure continues to exist. And right now it feels like we spend a lot of money, a lot of our limited funds creating the thing, and then we still haven't learned that the distribution side and getting it into these places, making people aware of it it used to be a given,
Yes.
because you had a default audience that was just there.
Yes.
Now it's a whole
We've
new
got to
challenge.
work harder.
Much, much harder and smarter. And I think that's a great point. Aware that I've taken a huge amount of your time, but I wondered if we could close on, when you look back across your time in the industry, which is very much not done, thankfully, but is there a role, a show, a moment, a relationship? What is the thing that you kind of cherish most out of your time in this amazing, weird industry that we both operate in on some level?
So a few years ago, we started bringing kids in from Rowley Ave for a school in Christchurch to be in the audience of What Now? It was the principal's idea, and she wanted to bring kids who just tuned up because they came, they came from complex backgrounds. A lot of the kids had high needs, but for those kids that just tuned up every day, and she said, well, could we get them into the audience? So we put on vans, and a teacher had to turn up at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning and get the kids in the vans, and they'd wander in out of the dark, and off we'd trot. I loved sitting on the bleachers with the kids and watching them watch the show and watching all the crew and the activity. And one day I was sitting next to a young boy, and I said, what do you think? And I went, it's great. I said, Yep. And he said, I'm going to get a job here one day. And I said, "Course you are." And I said, "What do you want to be?" And he pointed out to the cable dragger, the person that lifted the cables off the floor and walked behind the camera operator. And I went, "Absolutely." And he never worked at Whitebait. He never became a cable dragger, but he became a camera operator and now is in Canada. And I go, you have no idea what we do every day, where that might go. And I think that example just, for me, is why I'm still doing it at my old age, and why the need to serve and give kids the absolutely best we've got to offer every single day and moment matters.
I just got chills. I'm kind of choking up a bit. That's so beautiful. And honestly, it's just been just such a fascinating kōrero, and I just can't thank you enough for coming up here and, your contribution to this industry, still going and still very, very vital, I think, the lessons that you hold. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming up, Janine. And, yeah, kia ora.
The Fold is brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network. It's hosted by Duncan Grieve, with production by Tiahe Butler and Samuel Robinson. Series production is by Jane Yee.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to O Media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spin-Off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.